Sure. Welcome everyone. This another Sunday special with the usual crew. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So this week is quite. It was last week was quite an exciting week. We had the Property Investors Awards. We had some fancy headlines. 52% drop in transactions after stamp duty holidays gone. And there is a really interesting property that came on the market with 250% yield. So I think that will give us a few things to chat about for the next few minutes, and then hopefully won't run out of topics. What do you guys think? So we've got two judges from the Property Investors Awards, Helen, Jay. What did you guys think of the winners of the Property Investors? Were they your picks, or did you guys vote for others?
Harsh.
It was my first year as being a judge, so it was all kind of new to me. I didn't know what to expect, but I really enjoyed the process. And I don't know if people know, but actually you register your votes, your individual preferences online anonymously, so you don't know how anyone else has voted. So clearly I had people that I thought, but you never know if that is actually going to end up being the winner. So it's really interesting to see who were the eventual winners. No, there's and some really, really well deserved ones in there. Yeah.
I'm surprised Adam's not taking notes there, because he's tried to win one of these, hasn't he?
No comment. We could delve into what happened that night if you want, Ross, but I don't think it'd be ideal at this point in time.
Don't think that's ideal. No.
May backfire a little bit on you. So
no, absolutely. I'm sure Helen would enjoy the story, though.
All I can say is it reminds me of Jay's chat from last week about walls and stuff. That's all I can say.
Amazing. I need to hear that.
Nothing if not memorable.
Nice. And I think the Property Investor Awards, obviously they're not it's not the same thing if it's done online and done in the ballroom and with all the people in there. But at the same time, all of the people put the same amount of effort as if those awards were given in the ballroom. So congratulations to everyone who's the winner.
It's sad that we're not having the dinner this year, but we are definitely, or the dinner is definitely on the cards for next year. We've already got the date, 26th of November 22. So it's a Saturday. So book your hotel for that night in London. And and Jay actually presented a couple of the awards, didn't you?
I did. I presented a couple of the awards. It was a very last minute thing. I got a phone call saying, stick on a tux and go to the Bhattacharya Broadcasting Centre. You'll be greeted with some bubbly. Don't worry, it's not champagne. We'll be greeted with
sparkling
some
water.
Pardon?
Sparkling water.
It was sparkling water with apple juice, and I had to drive. So, but no, it was really good fun. It was the first time I've done something really like that. So that was good, but I think it was a really kind of competitive field this year. I think it's my second or third time judging, and I think I picked three of the winners. So there were three deals specifically that I gave 10s, which I've only ever given 9s before. But the deal of the year was an absolute banger, and it was the Savoys who won that one. And the deal was just, I think they're going to be talking on other platforms and sharing details of the deal. So I'll leave them to do that. It's their privilege, but absolute stonking deal. I think we're sitting there and I was like you take, one of those ones that just takes your breath away. Oh my God, the return on investment, the time in the deal, the GDP, every metric you could throw at it, it was an absolute beast of a deal. And they structured it very well. And then obviously, for Monster HMOs, I think the Farringdon girls or the Farringdon family won it. Yeah. And again, that's an absolute beast. The amount of documents you have to go through on that one. And that one got a 10, just the sheer audacity of a deal like that. You have to give it a 10. It's I can't remember, it's some ridiculous number of rooms in a building that they completely refurbished, and it's individual floors or individual HMO licenses. And it's just the way that they've structured it so intelligently. It just deserved it. And then the commercial...
We were all blown away, weren't we? When there was a few people that, because sometimes we like ring them to speak to them and to get more detail. And when that happened, is that my thing that's really annoying?
I think we've got some sound issues.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe that's better.
But when we spoke to them, like a few of the who did actually turn out to be the winners was super impressive. And I think we put down the phone to them and we were all like, whoa, like, you know, yes, that did you know, the person, the story, the deal, the extra detail did live up to what we were looking at and kind of analysing. Super impressive.
That deal, I think.
Go on, Ross.
Sorry, I was just going to say that deal. I think they presented it a while ago, the whole deal, and talked about the structure of it and how they'd layered it up and how they'd made it happen. And not so much the risks that they'd taken, but the risks they tried to mitigate with it, how they've obviously got history and experience, but nothing of that size. And I remember sitting at the back of the room just watching and thinking, oh my goodness, this is spectacular, utterly spectacular. And it wasn't without its trials and tribulations, especially over COVID, especially over the price of materials, getting people to work on it. It just was an unbelievable project.
It's not the easiest part of the world to have an HMO either, let alone a mega MO or whatever you want to call it. But Helen's gone and we've still got problems. But yeah, it's not. There's no really deep established HMO market in Ilkeston. It's quite a challenging location. So and it's not their backyard. It's kind of the other side of Derby. So from where they normally operate in Burton. So although it's nearby geographically, it's a fairly different town, different demographic, different world in many ways. So they were super brave to take it on.
And I think a lot of their application was pointing. They were very upfront and open about that, and that was, like I said, the audacity to do a deal of that size is mad on the face of it. But the fact that they came out in their application and was so very honest with the fact that we've got HMOs and we've done all this stuff before, but never to this scale. That was special. But I think it's one of those things.
Like, got some sound issues. It's really really strange because we normally don't have. No idea where those sound issues come from.
By process of elimination, it's not me. It's like Cluedo. Who's got the spanner?
Okay, well, I've been on mute and I can still hear it. So don't think it's me. I don't know. I'll try and...
You can't go on mute at the same time, guys. That's not how process of elimination works. Have you guys never fixed a consumer unit where the breakers flip? I mean, come on.
Okay, I think that helped. The issues are gone. Just there we go. Magic.
Ta-da.
No.
But, so back to the property investor awards. There were a couple of categories that were actually really very difficult to judge. So I think one of the hardest ones, which was actually, I mean, the HMO categories are always like competitive. They're probably some of the biggest categories in terms of submissions. But the co-living award this year was very, very difficult to judge. So it was really interesting to see how the other judges kind of viewed the applications. But I think overall, the awards went to the right people.
Okay, cool. Let's.
Is there a difference between co-living and an HMO?
There's a government definition between the two.
Right.
Now, the government definition and what property investors are calling their co-living units are two very, very different things. But I think what we had agreed upon at the time was the co-living has to, in our view, have sufficient enough communal and community spaces in order for it to be classified as co-living, as opposed to an HMO with a shared kitchen, right?
Right. Yep. Okay.
There has to be facilities that are shared above and beyond what you would find in a normal, decent, mid to high, kind of HMO. And that's kind of because the government definition didn't really fit any of the applications that were there. And I don't think it will really fit many applications, with the exception of, of something that's, far and away bigger or purpose built. But there were still some very interesting properties there. Really, really interesting. You find a lot of the stuff with the co-living and the HMOs is normally down to design. A lot of what you perceive as quality in an HMO, is how effectively the square footage has been used in the building. In that respect, design, but also the fit and finish. And I think a lot of that is kind of judged on the eye rather than on the numbers. But at the same time, you can't really, if your HMO isn't cash flowing and isn't viable, then you wouldn't really submit it into the awards anyway. So, and because it's quite heavily contested, you do find yourself going down to the minutiae to kind of find someone or something that sticks out.
Jay, next time you're in the minutiae with Cyril, can you explain to him that if it's HMO deal of the year, 6 or fewer rooms rather than 6 or less rooms, because it just triggers the grammar pedant within me so much I can't even tell you. Please sort it. But in seriousness, so does every judge vote on every category?
No, so this year was interesting. There were day 1 and day 2 judges. So people who, for scheduling reasons, could only judge on like the 9th, and others only on the 10th, or I can't remember the exact dates. But I think I judged both days. I think Helen did both days, and a couple of other judges did both days. And some judges didn't attend the physical judging. They judged from home or from their office or wherever. But the value of judging in the room with everyone else is actually you get to hear other people's viewpoints. And actually, I think it makes you a better judge. In at least that's how I feel. That's what I got out of it. But
that's right.
Yeah,
I wanted to
and it gives you a good chance to copy other judges.
Yeah. Well, if you're that kind of person, I think myself and Helen were probably amongst the 2 most vocal of the judges. So I dare say. But
suspend belief, everybody. Suspend belief.
But at the same time, it's probably only by a small margin, because you're in the room with some very kind of knowledgeable and outspoken property investors anyway. So but no, it was the value of being in the room and being with the other judges is for me, it's part of the experience.
But no conga.
No conga. Although they will record you without you knowing and stick it on a blooper reel, so that's always fun.
That was a great bit.
It was good.
Brilliant. And we had in the last sort of couple of days, we had those headlines about the 52% drop of transactions after the stamp duty in October. So what do you guys think of this? It's all right, go for it, Adam.
Jay can see me drawing breath. Yeah, it's just one of those. It's just one of those classic clickbait headline BS moments that you get all the time. You could have scripted it. Look, I would have thought, The Guardian for me has 2 levels of writing in it. One that I just cannot stand to even go anywhere near, and one that I actually quite enjoy, the relatively robust intellectual challenge of, although I don't necessarily always agree with their political views, which won't be a surprise necessarily, it would be kind of difficult space to occupy if you did. But it was just one of those you just see it and think, you lazy. I mean, where was your prediction before that then, guys? What were you saying it was going to be? Oh, what happened to the prices? Is that relevant in this article? Look, stop me before I just derail the whole thing. I just want to I feel as bad as if I just lost a 6-hour game.
Can you mute him? Can you just mute him?
Well, I think one of the problems
ghostwriter means you stay quiet in the background. That's what a ghostwriter does. Don't get credit. Don't get credit.
I think the problem that they're going to have is anyone who's trying to take that metric and measure it, is they're going to struggle with the thing that I would pick out the most that they would struggle with is the velocity of transactions, not the number of transactions, but the velocity of transactions. So during the stamp duty holiday, the velocity of transactions was through the bloody roof. Now, the same number of transactions may still be happening, but they'll just be happening slower. So if you take any period, and who knows what period they selected, maybe they selected the week after the stamp duty holiday finished and they stopped it a week ago, in which case it's hardly enough time to factor in, the fact that you've had solicitors who have been under the cosh trying to finish deadlines prior to the conclusion of the stamp duty holiday and things like that. So
putting people off taking annual leave on the other side of it as well.
So that was what I was going to say. Every solicitor you spoke to in England was taking a week's holiday and 10 days holiday, absolutely broken, because they were trying to get all the transactions through, so they weren't actually even physically available to do anything. It's mental.
And we're still going to do, the backdrop is still likely 1.5 million transactions this year in a market where we do 1 to 1.1 million. So to paint this as some kind of negative dawn is just yawn fest inducing, utter bilge, quite frankly. I'll tell you what I really think next time, when we discuss the article. This is a bit like, the dam broke this week. I must have gone the thick end of 6 months without posting anything about COVID. But you might have noticed I just burnt the keyboard the other night because I was like, I've got to speak because people aren't listening to stuff, and I'm just going to shout it into the open space. And then people still aren't going to listen to it, which is fine, but at least I've said it. Because the amount of discussions, the amount of non-mathematically robust discussions I have with people, and then just say, but you can't do that with but if we look at the 14th of July 1917, oh yeah, that's called data mining, right? Do you want to? I could give you a 10-step crash course in how not to interpret statistics on the spot, but I don't want to take up the rest of the time, even though I'm below my contractual share of talking today. So, but it elicits that same feeling within me of, please just make. And also, just stop believing things and then finding things that reinforce your beliefs, right? If you do that, anybody listening to this, that is the single worst thing you can do. So it's, people sometimes say to me, well, you've changed your mind since something I read 6 months ago. Yeah, I have, yeah.
Like a reasonable human being.
Yeah, because some stuff's changed. I'm not just going to be an express train on a track heading towards utter oblivion, carrying on regardless of new evidence and information. So, I reserve the right to do that, and I'm quite happy to be called on that, and I can hopefully explain why I changed my mind, and hopefully there was a logical basis to it, if you can imagine such a thing. So it just, look, mate, I've spoken to my doctor. My blood pressure's like 160 over 107, so we've got to change the subject. Sorry.
Well, and has that affected your voice as well?
You are very loud for a ghostwriter. We're going to review your contracts after this, I'll tell you.
I don't know, but you might be the new Darth Vader after this. A smaller version, obviously.
I think you raise a very valid point, and I think it was something I was trying to touch on, although not as eloquently, is what were the parameters for that data being drawn together? Because everyone will look at things like that, and like you say, it's a headline grabber, it's a clicker, but the reality of the situation is, even in the articles, they're not saying, oh, the data was driven from this and this and from this. It's just like it's a fugazi. They just pull it out their arse. And you see a lot of that. And my just a slight tangent. My wife, she's done degrees and stuff like this in animal welfare and horses and dogs and stuff like that. And she sees a lot of people like a lot of fake news and stuff that comes out. And she she goes, I read peer-reviewed things. I do this, that, and the other. I double-check stats. I go back. I sense-check my own understanding of something. If I'm not sure, I reach out. And there's in the last 3 months, there's been about 6 ranting posts. You'd love to see them, Adam. Really, you would. Of just trying to set the world to rights on. No, this is what real data is. This is what information is. This is how you interpret information rather than just espousing kind of like misinformation and things like that. But these are things that you find they like wildfire will get out there.
This is it. I tried on that post I always try to engage with everybody. There is maybe one person who I won't name live who I don't try my best to engage with, but he is a blithering idiot. So even I draw the line somewhere. But there's people on there saying, but you haven't seen this. Like, yeah, I have, right? But for us to have a discussion about it, we need to be open to both sides of the fence. We need the proper data, and I will have that discussion. And then I get people. I've had the odd angry message saying, "You're a sheep programmed by Bill Gates or whatever," and it's like, would that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was donating to Adam Lawrence Towers. I'd be very pleased to report that on the website, but they're not. Unfortunately, they're not. And in reality, I'm just trying to take a relatively practical and sanguine viewpoint. And when people say, the government's been lying to us, I'm like, what, ever since there's ever been a government? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what they do. And at the end justifies the means in their eyes. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And sometimes they get it wrong and they go outside of parameters and civil liberties and all the rest of it. Yeah, they do. And that's when we need to call them out and hold them to account. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind. But that doesn't then translate to, we never landed on the moon and the earth is flat. It's not a natural logical progression of things. So these things need to be looked at in the round. And again, there can be sensible discussions, or there can be just, you haven't done your research. Believe me, I've done more research than most people do in 10 lifetimes, right? I do a lot of research every day. I pretty much am a researcher. Warren Buffett does more research than me. That's about it, right? So I've done my research, right? It's not a problem.
It's one of those things, right? The more and more you talk to somebody, not somebody, but most people, by and large, there's if you're being negative, you'd say there is some ignorance or some arrogance involved, but actually it's not that. It's easy if someone disagrees with you to go, oh, that person's just ignorant or they're arrogant, right? But that's not the case. The problem is that there is something called assumption, and that's it. There are a lot of assumptions that are made, and then there are faint causal links that are connected to things that shouldn't be connected, or there's personal experience that kind of filters into it. And the assumption just builds to a point where actually it's given a tangible kind of, it becomes an asset that then an investiture that people then kind of propagate and send around the world. And that's where you get things like this.
And there's the whole cognitive bias, which is what you're both kind of talking about as well. Like, we look for data to back up the just as humans, to back up the stance that we already have. Whereas actually, if you're a bit cleverer or more mature about it, you look for, well, where is the other person coming from? And is there a valid point in that? You love this one, Adam. I was looking at something the other day, and I knew somebody else was looking at it, and they wanted to talk to me about this deal. And they said to me, have you done your due diligence on this property? How I didn't put the phone down on that person at that point, I don't know. But there was a really long silence where I was on mute and a few expletives were expressed. Like, sorry, do you know me at all? Oh my God. Thanks.
Were the expletives in your head in G's voice?
They'll be next time.
But you're so right, Helen. This is why you have to read the Guardian and the Telegraph, even if you don't want to read either of them, or at least be aware of what they're saying. Because if you're not, if you look down and that's the part of the danger of, and I get it, it's not all at the blame doesn't all lie at the individual's feet. At the end of the day, the algorithm does things to you. If you go on YouTube a lot, you can find yourself, you get pushed down rabbit holes, and you have to actively try and get away from those rabbit holes. And the Facebook algorithm is the same. It's showing, echo chamber, and this is why I say to me, it's really sad. I've only blocked people who are abusive, openly abusive to me, because I think I can't engage those people. I can't be bothered. But I hear lots of people who say, like, I've blocked loads of people since COVID. It's like, well, in that case, you're just creating your own echo chamber. That's the problem. Yeah. And there'll still be people. And we all need a Gordon, just to give him a random name. We all need a Gordon in our life, because it does make us think. It does. Ross and I have had these discussions before about various people, and we say, like, I don't really agree with him or her very much. I'm not going to name any names, Ross, don't worry. Well, I don't really agree with him or her very much at all, but they do make us think.
Yeah.
And that's extremely valuable, extremely valuable.
That's been quite a lot of that's come out of actually going back to property education from previous, but quite a lot of going for the last few years, but obviously not last year, I've tried to go to 2 different property educators things every year and go and pay for their courses and sit there. That's how I met Jay, actually, and sit there and listen to what they say. Some of the speakers are spectacular, Jay. Some of the speakers not so much, like the guy that was on before him and the guy that was on after him. And you sit and listen to them. But the reality of it is, even in these people talking nonsense, bullshit, trying to like just take money out of people's pockets, you quite often come away with things that are different from what you perceived before you went in, or different from what you thought about. And then you can go away and monetize those things. The difficulty is that's for people who've got property businesses. If you don't have property businesses, you end up buying courses from them, which is not a good thing. But that's where mostly Adam and I tend to talk about there is a benefit to doing that. It seems like a waste of a weekend at the time, but you quite often learn some of the processes which aren't necessarily all bad.
And from my perspective, I've been to some of those before. Like I've been to like a commercial developers course, and people are like, "Why are you here? You're not like even a developer." I'm like, "No, but that's part of all of my due diligence. I'm seeing who's here, who knows who's asking what questions, where the gaps in knowledge are. So when you ask the questions, I know that I need to ask you those questions. So that's all part of my due diligence process as well.
They don't call you the master underwriter for nothing, do they? That's for sure. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, it's
Can we just discuss property educators without slagging them off that much? What are we playing?
What's going on in the world? When you mentioned YouTube, has anybody they've been popping up all over my YouTube again, and I'd gone through for quite a while not having them. 2 different arseholes have been propping up lately, and they're like, how do I stop? How do I report this ad? How do I stop it? Oh,
imagine who those people might be.
You just need to get yourself YouTube Premium, and the ads will stop.
Okay. That'd be a good invest. That's a great investment.
That will cost you less than the wine
right there.
That's the nugget. Here we go. Right. Have a nice morning, everyone.
Nice one. Okay, good. Well, speaking about headline and attention-grabbing things, what do you guys think of a 250% yield retail investment in Scotland? There is something that came up, and I'll share the screen to show everyone. So something that came up in the auction, in Acutus auction, which is the shopping centre right in the centre of Dundee. Let me just see. This is it. Hopefully I'll share it. Yes, the shopping centre in the centre of Dundee with 539,240 square feet, tenants including B&M, Savers, lot of good brands, 583 space multi-story car park, and 1,341,000 per annum rent, and it comes in at £500 per £500, so £500,000 guide price. and it might sell for close to that, might sell for more than that. But what do you guys think of something that costs 93p per square foot and produces 250% gross yields?
There's a basic metric that you apply to something that big producing that kind of money, which is, can I build it for that, or can I knock it down for that? And the truth is, you can do neither. I mean, you'd probably, if you were to dig up all of the marble floor tilings, you'd probably be able to sell all the marble again for £1 million, right? So you know, it's completely ridiculous. But what's interesting about things like these is that, you know, it's the Scottish version of leasehold, so it's heritable, or what's the other one? It's not heritable.
It's leasehold.
It's leasehold. So, and the freeholder gets 7% of the net income, which is important because in certain deals that we've seen like this in the past in England, it's normally 7 to 10% of the gross. So when you say it's producing like 1.3 or 1.341 million or something like that, you kind of have to look at the facilities management, you know, all the other bits that go with it. And one of the more important things is to have a look really at the leases. So that's something we haven't really got an eyeball on, and which something which is very unusual for Acuitas is for them not to have a massive, like, they are the best people, them and Allsop Commercial, of course. Their tables when they're selling commercial properties have absolutely bloody everything in it. It's a master,
and like 10 different notes for every single tenant. And
like, you know, Specsavers have produced X amount per annum for this, and this is their tax year close. It gives you everything. Gives you the square footage, gives you the lease length term, break clauses, everything. Like all the kind of main points you'd want to look at in a lease, they put it in that table. So this is one of the very few lots where they haven't produced a table. So there are some really good tenants in there. There's like you've got the job centre, you've got Burger King, you've got Iceland, you've got B&M, and we'd mentioned this before, but B&M, I think it was Ross's comment, were like they're a very stable covenant in the high street at the moment. So you know, you look at big elements like that in the building, you think, right, there are some really good, what we would call like linchpins, like holding the facility together.
And there's things like also like there's a library in there, and there's a job center, and like I think it's just like a place where a lot of people come to for various different reasons. So
and that's really the future of having. You know, one of the big problems with buying shopping centers at the moment is that actually people aren't really going to shopping centers at the moment. Or they were going, but they're going, and they're going specifically for one place. They get what they want, and then they leave. And a lot of people who are in the commercial space are talking about creating environments where people go for experiences, right? So maybe they're going because they want to go to the library, and then they'll stop and have a Burger King on their way home, or they'll go into B&M and they'll pick up some of the weekly shop, and you know, it's a cause to go there and do more than just, you know, pick up a packet of cigarettes and head home, or whatever the story is. So the fact it's already built in some community value, you know, by having a library and maybe a couple of other community or open spaces there, actually it increases the viability that some of those linchpin tenants or covenants are likely to stay there longer than they would if there wasn't, you know, a footfall, you know, because footfall, I think you can do like footfall studies. We were thinking about getting one for our wall in Fulham to see, you know, how many people passed, and, you know, the viability of renting out that advertising space would be the number of eyes that would cast their glaze over it. They do the same thing with high streets, and they do the same thing with shopping centres. And people think, oh, all they're doing is they're measuring the number of feet that are coming in and the number of feet that are going out. They're not. They're recording the length of time that set of feet are in that building for. And moreover, they're looking at how many environments that those feet are interacting with within that set ecosystem. So it's actually it's a very kind of it's a very in-depth kind of thing to look at. And
as I understand it, Jay, and this is only second-hand info, but from tech people that I know, already in China, they have a way of using WeChat. So effectively, WhatsApp probably our near or Messenger, our nearest equivalent, and it's nudging people to go from here to here to here based on those patterns. So they might say, "Oh, did you know there's £3 off a double Whopper at Burger King today? If you're somewhere nearby and it's around about the right time of day, they'll ping it straight to your WeChat, and it will actually start to drive consumers where the sensors want them to go, and they can get a lot of symbiotic." And what you said about the community assets, for example, is a really good point around what this has got going for it. I mean, I think, you know, what do we always look at? Start with the end in mind. What's the term financing solution if you buy something like this? The reality is difficult at the moment, but I think I would hope that I would get something. What rates I would pay and what percentage of the purchase price would be open to interpretation, definitely. But you might also find, I don't know what the footfall indices are looking like around the country, but London may be behaving differently to a few other places. So a lot of it for me would also depend on where's the sale coming from and what's fundamentally changed. Dundee, in and of itself, is one of the more promising places in Scotland with a growing population and a growing market that is also quite tough to buy any stock or rent any stock in at the moment. So is that a reason to be a bit more positive about something like this? Possibly. I mean, my first impression was, has Piotr made a mistake? But my second impression was, this is like Bond Wolf on steroids, you know, just stick it in at 500 grand and see what happens, you know.
I just think, is this just not the commercial thing that we do, which is the pound house or the £5 house, and we get 50 million people who then pay 85 grand for a house that was listed at £1?
I don't think that's what this auctioneer does a lot of the time.
It would be very unusual for an acuitous to take on those behaviours. But I think what it comes down to is, what's the net? Because it's 250% on the gross.
So what?
But I mean, I always talk about the office building I bought in Birmingham donkeys years ago, and that was on gross. But once you netted it down, I paid £500,000 for something that's producing £500,000. But once you netted it, it was £50,000. Right, so it may be that £500,000 guide price isn't as absurd as we think it is.
I did see, Jay, unit number 139 is a Bitcoin farm, and they've included all the utilities, so it's not ideal for them. Possibly.
Could you imagine if they
so
got
this
those
could be the
not
so well gate shopping centre.
Indeed.
But I mean, even then, I like of that 1.341. Even if you were to say, look, £500,000 of it is running costs and the 7% to the landlord, then actually, you're looking at not a terrible yield, in fairness, and not a completely unrealistic guide price. But you have to take your point on board is.
I don't know what's going on, but the sound is really bad. I don't know we can fix it in any other way. Yeah, it's not Helen, definitely, but for some reason it's really bad, and I think it's really distracting for anyone who's listening. So maybe we should just like cut it short. And I mean, when I'm speaking, it's fine, no?
Is it fine when I speak?
Take us to the net, then, Piotr. Go on, mate.
So I'm pretty sure. I mean, the net. No, it's really bad. It's so distracting, this noise. But I think the net amount on this it won't be very, very, very different to this 1.3 million. Maybe there will be 300k of costs, so you have £1 million of net rent. I think there was a shopping center in Falkirk which had 600k rent coming in, and out of that, I think 200k was net profit, but there was a lot of empty space. So I think this one doesn't have as much empty space. So I'm pretty sure once the legal pack comes out, the numbers won't look massively distorted to what they are right now. But I just, yeah, it's very much of a matter of, if you had 500,000, would you buy something like this? And then what actually would be the reality of owning something like that? Because then you own something like this, and like, probably, I mean, this is pretty much like owning a whole town, because so much depends on the ownership and everything else. So
but
yeah.
you know that area well, don't you?
Yeah, I studied in Aberdeen, and I used to go to Dundee a bit for like various university sports tournaments. So I do know that area.
Go.
Yes,
You're a local. Be all right.
you could say so. Yeah.
But I think Piotr, your point about what are the realities of owning a building like that is important, and you marry that with Adam's comment about what is the term funding for it on the back end, and you find yourself with a very, very reduced buying market for something like that. So maybe the guide price is reflective of the risks and that are involved with it, maybe.
Yeah. So, guys, I think we should stop the conversation here, because I'm being super distracted by the sounds, noises, and I'm annoyed that we can't fix it. And I think what we'll do is we just kind of let people put comments and respond to those comments later on. I will pick it up next week when we've got everything fixed with sound and everything else, and come back to it.
Do you think Piot's a way to try and buy a shopping centre just now?
www.
Let me check my cards and stuff.
Next week, the crowdfunding raise. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice one. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and sorry for the sound problems today. We'll respond to your comments later on today, and see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Yeah.